So in our last class, we examined Heart of Darkness from the perspective of colonialism as a text that interrogates colonial rule based on the colonialist perspectives themselves. In our discussion, we saw Conrad's attempt to expose the atrocities perpetrated in the Congo Free State by the Belgian government in the 19th century. We examined the text mostly based on the formal elements like a plot, the setting, and the general summary of the story. Today we'll take a step further to specifically discuss the colonial impulses in the text, the historical relevance of some of the portions of the text, and to link all that up with the idea that even though Conrad aimed to criticize the high-handedness of Leopold II, King Leopold II of Belgium, in the running of the Congo Free State. Given all the atrocities committed, the forced labor, the killing of the Africans, maiming and deforming some of them, Conrad inadvertently left in the text evidence to suggest racism or racial biases against Africans, which continues to speak against his work till today. It should be reiterated that the subject matter of Conrad's Heart of Darkness is colonialism, and this is seen in the words of Charlie Marlowe, the chief narrator of the novel, when he makes the following statement. Quote, "The conquest of the earth, which mostly means the taking it away from those who have it, the conquest of the earth, which mostly means the taking away from those who have a different complexion or slightly flatter noses than ourselves, is not a pretty thing when you look into it much. I'll take it again. The conquest of the earth, which mostly means the taking it away from those who have a different complexion or slightly flatter noses than ourselves, is not a pretty thing when you look into it much. The conquest of the earth, which mostly means the taking it away from those who have a different complexion or slightly flatter noses than ourselves, is not a pretty thing when you look into it much. In that statement, the conquest of the earth is a metaphor for colonialism. It refers to the colonial conquest, because that is what colonialism was all about. Going to someone else's land or country and claiming it for yourself by force if the people resist. If the owner of the land resists, then it is taken by force through guns, through bullets, through death. And one of the driving forces of colonialism is racism. By racism we mean the prejudice held by some who believe that one race is superior to another. Believe that one race is superior to another. And that is seen in that statement, in the statement where it says, they're taking it from those who have a different complexion. That is where racism is implied as a driving force for colonialism. Okay? That's where racism is implied as a driving force for colonialism. From those who have a different complexion or slightly flatter noses, because the noses of Africans are different from the noses of the Europeans. Even the eyes are different. All of this signal racism. Racism is informed by a difference in skin pigmentation. Racism is informed by difference in skin pigmentation. If I have a different skin from yours, then probably I'm inferior to you, or you're inferior to me. And the statement is not a pretty thing when you look into it. Sums up Conrad's experience and observation of the effects of colonialism on the natives after his sojourn into the heart of darkness. That is after his journey into Africa. And he's putting it lightly when he says, he's being euphemistic about it, when he says, it's not a pretty thing when you look into it much. That is, when you look at it closely, not from afar, because probably when you are in Europe, you'll be told glowing stories of the activities of the colonialists in Africa, perhaps the missionaries, the activities of the missionaries, the good works. But when you have a close encounter, when you are there yourself and you actually see the realities on ground, which is when you look into it pretty much, you then realize that it is not a sight to behold. So I'm taking time to do this because I expect that when you get to do your analysis of literature, whether for your seminar or project, you should take a text, a simple portion of a text, and dissect it in pages. Okay? Because each portion of the text is loaded with its own semantic import. And it will take only an insightful student of literature to be able to actually dwell on a portion of a text and make justice to it. So that is what that quotation means. It implies colonialism, the driving force of colonialism, which is racism, and the atrocities of colonialism rendered in a euphemistic term. Okay? And in Heart of Darkness, we are also led to believe that colonialism itself, as a notion, as a concept, did not begin with the English. They did not just wake up one day and started colonizing the earth, taking people's lands and claiming them for themselves. We are told that this thing was also done to the English. Also done to the English. The English themselves were colonized. The English themselves were colonized by the Romans. So colonialism is recurrent in human history. It did not only happen in the 19th century. Humans putting other human beings under control by force is not a new thing on the earth. It is a recurrent aspect of human history because the Romans did it to the English and the English did it to us, the Americans, okay, are doing it to us now, and the Chinese are also doing it to us now. Okay, so it's a recurrent thing. In the air where the powerful control the weak. And I have my evidence in the text, so I'm going to cite it. And that's that Marlowe begins his narrative in Heart of Darkness by reminding us that England has been as dark and savage to the first Romans. Marlowe begins his narrative in Heart of Darkness by reminding us that England has been as dark and savage to the first Roman colonists as the blank spaces of Central Africa to more recent emissaries of light. To more recent emissaries of light. Ah, you are closer. Maybe I'm beginning to understand how this thing works now. Marlowe begins his narrative in Heart of Darkness by reminding us that England has been as dark and savage to the first Roman colonists as the blank spaces of Central Africa to the more recent emissaries of light. Again, I will subject that portion of the text to analysis. Okay? So, in that portion, the implication is that to the Romans who conquered England, the English were savages. Just as the English saw Africans as savages in the 19th century, the Romans saw the English as savages. Meaning that the English people who claim to be civilized, in the 19th century, were not thought to be so when the Romans first met them. They were not civilized. The Romans thought of themselves as those who brought civilizations to the English. Just as the English thought that they brought civilization to us. Now, as the blank spaces of Central Africa, Central Africa, I take Central Africa, I take that to mean to be a metaphor that describes Africa as her historical wilderness prior to colonial rule. Prior to the advent of colonialism, Africa was seen as a historical wilderness, a place that did not exist in the civilized world. Blank spaces of Central Africa, meaning unmapped, unrecognized, uncharted territory, dangerous, unknown. Okay? So Africa was a historical oblivion prior to the colonial encounter. As far as the colonial masters were concerned, Africa was not known until they saw it. History did not begin in Africa until colonial masters came. History did not begin in Africa. Nobody knew us. We did not exist. We began to exist the moment the colonial masters saw us. That was when our history began. Blank spaces. The whole of Africa was just a blank space on the world map. Nobody knew it. Okay? Which is why they kept using the word discovered. This person discovered this place. Christopher Columbus discovered America. Alright? And this is and other explorers who discovered places. Because those places did not exist until they were discovered. Okay? which is why uh, Ugu is told in Have a Yellow Sun that there's an answer that he's supposed to give to the teacher and the one that he needs to know by himself. Okay? So if you asked who discovered River Niger, you can write Mungo Park, but note that that's not true. Just write it so that the teacher will mark it for you. But you know very well that the people of the Niger had lived there for centuries before Mungo Park arrived. But just give the teacher his answer. Okay? Right? Because if they say who discovered America and you don't write Columbus, then you don't get to have first class. You're going to fail. You'll be a dropout. So give the answer to the teacher, but know that the original owners of the America, the native Indians, had their own civilization and lived there for ages before Columbus came. So there's book wisdom and there's life wisdom. And in that quotation, okay, let me just take it again. Marlowe begins his narrative in Heart of Darkness by reminding us that England had been as dark and savage to the first Roman colonists as the blank spaces of Central Africa to the more recent emissaries of light. By that statement, emissaries of light, we are referring to the English explorers who went to Africa in the 19th century. And it is a euphemistic way of referring to them. It's a metaphoric way of referring to them. And why are they called emissaries of light? It's because they claim to bring civilization to Africa. The light of civilization. They claim to bring the light of civilization to Africa. All right? I am dwelling on this text because I want you to have a cue so that when you pick up a text, you do not just dump data on the page. When you pick up a text, you take a portion and you analyze. It's a euphemistic way, it's a metaphoric way of referring to the Europeans as those who brought civilization to Africa. That's what it means. The colonialist. Of course, you should by now have known that the claim of bringing civilization was a ruse, right? That was the surface reason. The real reason, as we see even in Heart of Darkness, is economic. To loot the resources of Africa. And even till today, they still use this ruse in various ways. Sometimes as grants, sometimes as loans, sometimes as aids, sometimes as assistance, intervention, to have access to the resources of Africa. So it has not ended. That's why we keep saying that colonialism has not ended, but it exists in different guises. We should also note how Conrad finally saw the colonialism for its stark truth. They call themselves emissaries of light, those who bring civilization, but Conrad sees them for what they are. Sees colonialism for the truth that it is. Sees colonialism beyond its surface claims. when surface cleans. And after all his experiences, Conrad described colonialism as the vilest scramble for loot that ever disfigured the history of human conscience and geographical exploration. The vilest scramble for loot that ever disfigured the history of human conscience and geographical exploration. The vilest scramble for loot that ever disfigured the history of human conscience and geographical exploration. Colonialism was nothing other than the rush to take resources from Africa, nothing more, nothing less. All the other things done were just to aid that purpose. The vilest scramble for loot that ever disfigured the history of human conscience and geographical exploration. Heart of Darkness is an autobiographical novel. Heart of Darkness is an autobiographical novel. By autobiographical novel, it is meant that it is based on the experiences of the author or reflects the author's experiences. It tells part of the author's story. And we can safely say that the narrator in many ways exhibits the author, Conrad, in his extra-literary experiences. So Marlowe is Conrad. If I say Marlowe is Conrad, Marlowe is Conrad. So the story in Heart of Darkness chronicles Conrad's own journey to the Congo in 1890. The story in Heart of Darkness chronicles Joseph Conrad's journey to the Congo in 1890. In 1890. So Conrad actually visited Africa, and that explains his writing the story. While in Africa, he was ill, and he was devastated by what he saw, being the consequences of the colonial rule on Africa, the landscape, the people, the resources, the violence, the hunger, the killing, the disease. So that explains the part that the novel is autobiographical. So in writing this story and publishing it in 1899, Conrad hopes to expose the atrocities committed by Leopold II in the Congo Free State. Writing the story, he hoped to expose the atrocities of Leopold II in the Congo Free State, which was run like a personal estate. So Conrad was one among the first European writers to write about the atrocities of colonialism, as depicted in Heart of Darkness. It's unfortunate that even in that expose, he is still guilty of racism in the way he depicts African characters. Okay? Or maybe he's depicting African characters the way the Europeans saw them at the time, not necessarily the way he feels Africans are. Who knows, perhaps. But literature is about representation, and we take what is represented, just the way it is, and nothing more. And that is why Achebe is justified in his criticism of Conrad, in terms of how he depicts Africans in the novel. So in the course of grabbing ivory, the Europeans will not allow anything to stand in their way. Sometimes not even other Europeans will stand in their way. So that shows you how dangerous colonialism is, because human life is expendable, and ivory and other colonial commodities are priceless. So in the story, Malo is in command of a steamer. Malo is a captain of a steamer or a steam boat. Of course, Conrad was just a captain on a steamboat for 10 days. And that happened because he had to replace a sick captain. So it was not as if Conrad went to Africa as a captain. It was just incidental. I had to be a captain of the steamboat. Excuse me. So we have a lot of historical correlates between the character of Malo and that of Conrad, especially the fact that Conrad actually went to the Congo Free State. The depiction of skulls on poles in the novel, the depiction of skulls on poles in the novel is symbolic of is symbolic of the European atrocities towards the natives in a bid to suppress them and loot the resources in the land. It's just a symbolic way of representing what happened, how cruel they were towards the Africans. If they ever resisted the Europeans' attempt to grab the ivory, or whether it was rubber or any other colonial trade objects, they will be crushed. So, to prove that this actually happened in history, we are told in the preface that a European trader by name Leon Rum decorated his flower bed with skulls of some 21 victims of his displeasure, including women and children. Decorated his flower beds with the skulls of some 21 victims. So in the end, you see that it is not Africa that was dark, it was the Europeans who were dark, but they had dark minds. Only dark minds could perpetrate this kind of atrocity. Not only kill the persons, but use the skulls as decoration. Leon Rum decorated his flower beds with the skulls of some 21 victims of his displeasure, including women and children. So we then understand, because this action is, I think in the novel, Mr. Kurtz is used to represent this character, Leon Rum. So you could see that when Kurtz is dying, his psychological darkness matches his actions, the kind of action that is being described. His actions come back to haunt him at the moment of death. Which is why he says, "Oh, the horror," before he dies. So the story begins on the River Thames. The story begins on the River Thames. River Thames. Where Mallow and other crew of the ship, the Nelly, are resting. And in the course of resting, they play a game of dominoes. And then Mallow tells the story about one of his adventures into the heart of Africa. In his company are the lawyer, an accountant, Malo himself, and the director of the company and captain of the ship. One of the key narrative strategies in this novel is the use of contrast. The use of contrast. One of the key narrative strategies in Heart of Darkness, this novella, Heart of Darkness, is the use of contrast. Contrast is a device that is deployed to show differences. Deployed to show differences. And contrast is a motif in the novel. So I'm taking time to do all this because we notice this tendency by students to dwell more on telling of stories without being literary in the analysis, being technical in the analysis. So I hope this might help. So contrast is the motif in the novel because it is sustained. The sustained device from the beginning to the end. And it is recurrent. The motif is an idea, a theme, a symbol, an action that is recurrent in a story and serves as a narrative strategy. So the first contrast that we see in the story is in the depiction of River Thames and the depiction of the Congo River. The Thames is described in glorious terms as a form of civilized river because it is in England. It's described in glorious terms, whereas when Malo gets to Africa, he describes the river there to suit his perception of the African landscape as uncivilized, as an uncharted territory, dangerous, even to the European person. In fact, one of the images assigned to the river in the Congo is that of a snake, a large snake. And we all know how dangerous a snake is. But the Thames is described in glorious terms if you read the novel. Another level of contrast is in the depiction of the European explorers as heroes. European explorers as heroes. They are depicted as conquerors, whereas Africans are depicted as the conquered. This serves colonialist purposes. Because the Africans in the novel are depicted as uncivilized compared to the Europeans, who are actually the bringers of civilization. Who are the bringers of civilization. Are those who bring civilization. The Europeans are sophisticated, the Africans are primitive. So I recently made a post on the Heart of Darkness on my website. The title is Language and Style in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. Language and Style in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness. You Google it. It should be ranked third on Google search now. If you Google Language and Style in Joseph Conrad's Heart of Darkness, should be ranked third position on Google. Now you can read that and some other posts to have an idea of how to give aesthetic analysis of literature to make it look like you are a student of literature, so that you not look like you are telling a story. Okay? Because literature is understood through language. Represented through language and is so understood. All right. So another narrative device that you need to note about this work is allusion. Allusion is allusion. Which is a brief reference that is made in a work of art. Which is a brief reference that is made in a work of art. In Heart of Darkness, we have historical allusion. That means a reference made to history. After all, this Heart of Darkness is a modernist text. And modernist texts are usually historical because of realistic nature. Modernist novels aim to achieve realism, meaning that they have to depict the extra literary. So that explains why historical allusion is one of the most important narrative techniques in this novel. So the novel alludes to the history of colonialism. Novel alludes to the history of colonialism in Africa, particularly the Congo. Historical allusion is also seen in the reference being made to Francis Drake and Sir John Franklin, who were explorers, European explorers. Sir John Franklin. Were European explorers. Conrad has been criticized for sexism or total Conrad has been criticized for sexism or the total attempt to ignore women in the work or disparage women in the work. The depiction of women as unintelligent is seen in the work as even as we don't have strong female characters in the novel. Mallow's aunt, who recommends him for the job, is seen as unintelligent because she does not know that the company is run for profit and does not really care about the lives of the Africans in Africa. That the missionary work that they claim to be doing is just a surface, a ruse to cover up for the main work that they're doing, which is looting the continent dry. So the woman is depicted as not knowing this. She thinks that Mallow is going to Africa to save Africans. Okay? Mallow is a savior and a steamboat going to Africa to save the Africans. Not knowing that the Europeans are going there to save themselves. Then we have analogy. Analogy is a device that allows for comparison of two things, two persons and things. An analogy in this novella is achieved through simile, mostly through simile. Mostly through simile. That is the comparison of two things using as or like, a simile. For instance, the Africans are compared to ants. That's like they work like ants, which alludes to how Africans were forced to work for Europeans during the colonial era. When you read the novella, you come across loads of similes that create the device of analogy. We also have synecdoche. 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 Synecdoche is the use of a part to represent a whole and vice versa. Synecdoche is the use of a part to represent a whole and vice versa. So, as a student of literature, you need to be armed with your literary terms. The literary terms should be here. So immediately you see in a work of art, you can identify. So that's what will help you to discuss the work as a student of literature. Without that, you will just be telling stories. So if you quote a portion and it's synecdoche, you're able to identify, that makes you a student of literature. But most of you might say synecdoche, but it doesn't make sense to you because you don't know what it is. All right? Okay? So you need to arm yourself. For some, even if the metaphor is as big as this house, they will enter it and pass. They don't know that that's metaphor. It should not be so. And most of these things can be done through practice. It's practice that makes perfect. So don't just think that by reading literary terms once that you will stay with you. No, why don't you do it every day until you master it? Okay? So that you can discuss literature intelligibly as a critic of literature. Okay? Because in the next seminars, I will probably take your papers and I will read the quotes that you've made, and I will ask you to identify the truth. Yeah, because what most people do is just to lump quotes without explaining them. You lump quotes, lump data, and you don't explain them. Which is why you don't do analysis. All you do is to leave quotes, make small sentence and leave quotes and fill the pages. It's not done. You can use one quote, just 4-line quote, and make a whole page analysis of a whole page or even 2. That's if you are armed with the tools of literature that we are talking about, because each quote, each portion of a text that the writer does is an artwork, and it should be subjected to analysis, sustained analysis. So how do you do this? You arm yourself with literary terms. Okay? For instance, I have on my website these terms that I've selected. If you Google notes on selected literary terms, you can be exposed to the ones that you really need. There are many of them, but those ones that are selected are the ones that are popular and the ones you definitely come across in a work of art. And if you study them daily, you'll be good with them, and you can identify them in any novel that you read, and you make the novel more interesting to you. In fact, you feel more satisfied when you begin to make these discoveries yourself. That is the truth. That's what you ought to do. Instead of just doing other unprofitable things, you can be reading notes on selected literary terms or any other one, but let's just be this. Well, for instance, if I've asked what is synecdoche, it would have been strange to some people. It's not strange to some people. Okay, good. So it's the use of a part to represent a whole, and the use of a whole to represent a part. Okay, but in what I observe in Heart of Darkness, don't worry, since it's not strange that people will see when it is your turn to present seminars and projects. So what is observed in Heart of Darkness is how the author describes the Africans in parts, using parts of the body. not as whole persons. That means that he is otherizing Africa. Is what? Otherizing Africa. Otherizing Africans. That's presenting Africans as the other. The other. The other. Not self, because the Europeans are self, not as self. Self means wholeness, complete. Okay? So presenting Africa in synecdoches, presenting Africans in synecdoches demonstrates that Africans are not whole, are not complete human beings. Okay? So you could see how that device fits into the thematic concerns of the text. How the literary device fits into the thematic concerns of the text. Africans are depicted as hands, teeth, eyes, and not as whole human beings. So that exemplifies the otherization of Africans. Non-Africans as other, as the other, and not as self, whole, complete. Okay? And you need to understand that the concept of the self is drawn from one of the religions of the world. Because the self is that which is whole and complete, without any spiritual problem. All right? It is now it is a literary term. It is now a post-colonial term. But its origin lies in religion, religious philosophy of the Buddha. Okay? Where the self is one that is united with creation, with the spiritual, and is complete. So by presenting Africans as the other, that means Africa has deeply spiritual problems. All right? They're not complete people. Serious spiritual issues. All right. They're not complete. So if you read the novel, if you read the novella, or whenever you read the novella, or if you ever read a novella, you can observe how Africans are depicted, all right, as parts, not as whole. Okay, that's synecdoche. For instance, in describing one of the Africans that Malo says, close to where Kurt lives, Malo writes, I saw a face among the leaves on level with my own, looking at me very fierce and steady. So you don't see an African, it sees a face. Right? And that face represents a whole person. That's synecdoche, right? That's synecdoche, right? Good. You're not sure? Okay, so we have irony. The modern novel is written in the ironic mood. The modern novel is written in the ironic mood. Like if you know your archetypal criticism very well, you understand that the modern novel is written in the ironic mood. Both the heroes, the theme but the hero and the theme are rendered in the ironic mood. In fact, it is low mimetic. Low mimetic. It's low mimetic. The ironic mood. So, irony defines our understanding of the modern novel. So, Heart of Darkness then is a novel of ironies. Heart of Darkness is a novel of ironies. Heart of Darkness is a novel of ironies. And these ironies exist at different levels. Whether you want to look at the character or you want to look at the story itself, the themes, they all exist in ironies. Okay, that has to be understood ironically. Right? Mood. M-O-D-E. M-O-D-E. The ironic mood. Okay? If you want to go by character, then we look at Kurtz. And to go by character, then we look at Kurtz, Mr. Kurtz. Alright? And to go by character, then we look at Mr. Kurtz. Mr. Kurtz is an ironic character. In the sense that he is not who he is presented. He's not who he has been presented. He's not as he has been presented to us. He is not who has been presented to us. He's not as he was presented to us. As I said in our first class, Kurt's character provides the major anti-climax of the novel. Kurt's character presents to us the anti-climax of the novel and anticlimactic nature of the novel, because he is built up before our eyes, and then when we meet him, we are disappointed because he is not who we think he is. He is not who we think he is, or who we have been told he is. That's irony. And the level of a character is called a first-class agent, a remarkable man. It's called a first-class agent, a remarkable man, resourceful to the company, strong. We know of his great deeds, but when we meet him, he's sick and dying. And we then begin to know the atrocities that he has committed, the killings, his greed for ivory. And we know that he's not heroic at all. He's not heroic at all. He's rather an anti-hero, because he's a hero without the traits of a hero. That's irony. That's nothing but irony. You want to look at irony at the level of the story. Okay? Want to look at him at the level of the story. Want to look at irony at the level of the story. Then we see the Europeans' quest to civilize Africa as ironic. We also see the Europeans attempt to see themselves as civilized people as ironic. Because they are complete opposite of what they are. They are the ones who should be called savages in the novel, and not the Africans, not the innocent, peace-loving, gentle African people. Those who bring civilization are those who kill those that they want to civilize and loot their resources. That's ironic. Okay? Suspense. 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 Suspense is a narrative technique. Suspense is a narrative technique. Suspense is a narrative technique through which the author sustains the interest of the reader in the story, through which the narrator, through which the author sustains the interest of the reader in the story. Sustains the interest of the reader in the story by withholding important information for the later, by deliberately withholding information from the reader till later. It says, read on. I won't tell you what happens next until later in the novel. That's what the author does. Every author does that as a way of hooking the reader to the story. The reader is hooked to the story by suspense because he or she wants to find out what will happen later. But the information is deliberately withheld by the author in a disguise, in a subtle way, so that the reader will not be angry. All right? So this is what Conrad does in Heart of Darkness. He's very good at withholding important information and suddenly surprising us with the information. You'll get to know this if you read the story or when you read the story. Okay? Journey motif. Journey motif. Journey motif. Journey motif. Or some people call it leitmotiv. Leitmotiv. As I said, a motif is a narrative strategy denoted by the recurrence of an idea, a concept, a symbol in a story. And call it motif or leitmotiv. Leitmotiv. So in the story we have journey motif. Journey motif. The story itself is anchored on a journey. Sometimes journey motif can be called quest motif, where the character is looking for something, searching for something. The quest motif. So the journey into the heart of darkness is not only physical but psychological, deeply psychological journey for both the narrator and other characters. The other characters. And this journey motif is maintained throughout the story. Either you're going or you're coming back. And in every journey, there is something to learn. In every journey, you have adventure, you have stories to tell. Journeys are packed with meaning, with lessons to be learned. And that is exactly what happens to the reader who encounters Malo's journey into the heart of darkness. We are exposed to adventures, we are exposed to stories, we are exposed to lessons, we are exposed to interesting, fascinating things about life. And through these encounters, we are changed psychologically. In fact, before Conrad left England to travel to the heart of darkness, to Congo, he would not have known that so much atrocity was being committed until he got there. So a journey is always, there's always something to learn. And life itself is a journey. You are on a journey. You must understand that. Okay? You are all on a journey. So sometimes the journey is implied, not necessarily stated. So this journey has changed Kurt. Kurt left England. Kurt left England as a musician, a lover, someone well loved, a gentleman. But when he arrived in Africa, he turned into something else. He became a monster, became greedy, became wild and crazy in his hunt for ivory. So journey has the capacity to alter and to change, depending on where the journey takes you to, the nature of your environment. Okay? Malo also gains a perspective by journeying into the heart of darkness. Malo also gains a perspective by journeying into the heart of darkness. And this is why he's able to tell this story to his comrades on the Nelly. It is his experience in the Congo Free State that enables him to make the conclusions that he makes about colonialism. If you do not have the experience, you cannot draw your conclusions. You cannot draw your lessons. Which is why you must always have experience, right? Okay, maybe not all experiences, but maybe experience of research. Okay, you must actually do the research. Actually read the books and do the writing, because what's more important is the process. Because it's the process that will transform you. Nothing more, nothing else. Not the outcome, but the process itself. When you do the research and when you get to the other side, you know that you have been changed. You're not the same person ever again. But if you don't do that, then you remain the same because you did not go through the process. All right? So you must be ready to go through the process and not take the easy way out. Personification. Personification. It's another important trope in Heart of Darkness, and it refers to the act of ascribing human attributes to inanimate things, act of ascribing human attributes to inanimate things. The art of ascribing human attributes to inanimate things. Inanimate things. Non-living things are made to behave like living things, imbued with the attributes of human beings. That's personification. For instance, the bush around us said nothing and would not let us look very far either. Perhaps it talks about the silence of the heart of darkness and how thick the